Hey guys, tonight we travel back, way, way back, under the honeyed glow of an ancient Levantine moon, where the sandstone streets of Mari whisper with incense smoke, wedding songs, and the strange clink of something metallic tucked beneath embroidered silks. You're not in your soft bed anymore. You're squinting under the flicker of oil lamps, dodging donkey carts, and trying not to trip over a fishmonger's tired feet. Syria, roughly 1800 BCE. It's your cousin's wedding, and you forgot the gift. Again. Classic you. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Pop your city and time zone in the comments. Let's see who else is staying up way too late for ancient trivia. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You weave through the market in the city of Ebla, where stone roads are warm from the day's heat. Spices crowd the air, cumin, saffron, something vaguely burnt. Merchants bark half-heartedly, kids dart under woven stalls, and you swear a monkey just stole a fig from your pouch. At the center of it all, loud and unmissable, a wedding is about to begin. Weddings here aren't polite weekend affairs with plastic chairs and potato salad. They're community spectacles, days long, full of feasting, dancing, and at least one relative fainting from wine. But among the rose water and stringed lyres, something oddly specific keeps appearing. Spoons. Silver, bronze, even bone-carved spoons hang from strings around necks, peek out of dowry chests, and jingle from belts like weirdly useful jewelry. You raise an eyebrow as a child solemnly presents one to the bride, wrapped in cloth, cradled like a holy relic. It's not just decorative, it's important. Spoons in ancient Syria weren't just for soup or lentils, which were the reigning dish of the region. They were deeply symbolic, sometimes sacred. By the time you reach the wedding tent, a sprawling canopy stitched with gold thread and marital nerves, you've seen over a dozen people exchange spoons with ritual reverence. You ask around. A toothless old woman spits a date pit and says, "You give a bride a spoon so she can stir her own fate." Then she laughs so hard she nearly topples off her stool. There's something to it. Bronze Age Syrians treated spoons with a curious level of seriousness. They appeared in marriage contracts, tombs, and even peace treaties. Historians still argue whether these spoons were primarily practical, ceremonial, or just the ancient equivalent of a coffee maker off the registry. You step inside the tent, where perfumed air sticks to your lungs like syrup. The bride, hands trembling under layers of embroidered linen, smiles nervously as her aunt opens a cedarwood box. Inside, a pair of ornate spoons, inlaid with lapis lazuli and swirling script that seems to shimmer. Everyone bows. No forks, no knives, just spoons. Why? It starts, perhaps, with grain. The region's lifeblood, wheat and barley, grown along the banks of the Euphrates and Orontes, were symbols of fertility, prosperity, and survival. And spoons, those humble cupped tools, were the means of serving and sharing them. They bridged the divine with the domestic. If gods were fed, they were fed with spoons. If babies were named, a spoon dipped in honey sealed the ceremony. And weddings? They were about merging households, about blending family recipes, rituals, and, unfortunately, rivalries. Gifting a spoon was a promise. Here, stir your new life well. May it never burn. As the ceremony begins, an officiant, not unlike a judge, rabbi, and DJ, all rolled into one, raises a carved olive wood spoon over the couple's joined hands. He speaks in slow, solemn Akkadian. You don't catch all the words, but you recognize the moment. This is a covenant marked not by rings, but by a spoon. Your seatmate, a merchant in orange robes, leans over and whispers, "See that pattern? That's a fertility glyph. Two birds nesting. He smirks. It's also a warning. Keep the husband well fed or he'll fly off. The bride giggles. The groom tries not to. A subtle joke in sacred metal. It's not just Syrians either. Archaeologists have found similar spoon traditions in neighboring Mesopotamia and Anatolia. But Syrians, they made it fashion. Their spoons were often shaped like tulip petals or goat hooves, their handles twisted into serpents, gods, and even celestial maps. And wedding spoons? Always paired, never solo, always curved the same, never mirrored. Why? Historians still debate whether that was to reflect unity or to prevent envy between newlyweds. Back in the wedding tent, music rises, drums thrum like heartbeats, and women ululate in piercing waves. You catch a glimpse of the bride tucking one of the spoons into her belt near her belly. A blessing for future children, or maybe just for strong digestion. You nod, dazed. That's true. You never know. Outside, firelight flickers on pottery jars and dancing feet. Spoons clink against bowls as guests finally dig into thick stews laced with lamb and mint. You take a bite. It's glorious, warm, rich, comforting. And as you lift the spoon to your mouth, you wonder, how many hands has this spoon passed through? How many weddings? How many quiet, sacred promises? The night deepens. Somewhere a flute weeps softly. The stars blink awake, and the wind carries whispers of other ceremonies, other brides, other spoons. You're just beginning to understand. But don't worry. There's plenty more to uncover before morning. The next morning creeps in quietly, pink and sleepy, over the rooftops of Ibla. You're still half wrapped in your borrowed linen robe, walking with sore feet and a satisfied belly toward the edge of the marketplace. The wedding feast might be over, but something tugs at your mind. Those spoons. Why did everyone treat them like sacred scrolls? You stop at a stall shaped like a crooked rib cage, overflowing with trinkets and shiny oddities. The merchant grins, one gold tooth glinting, and gestures toward a display. Dozens of spoons. Some polished bronze, others dull bone. A few so delicate they look like they'd snap if you breathed too hard. He picks one up and taps it against your knuckle. You want a marriage spoon? He asks. One with status. One she can show off when her neighbors come sniffing around. So that's it. These weren't just for eating lentil soup. They were signals, tiny curved declarations of wealth, lineage, and taste. Ancient Syrian society, much like yours, knew how to flex. Back then, you see, everything meant something. The fabric of your belt, the scent of your oils, even your cutlery. And when it came to spoons, well, let's just say you didn't hand someone a goat bone stirrer unless you were asking to be cut out of their will. In wealthier households, wedding spoons weren't only made from bronze or silver. They were gilded. They were inlaid with semi-precious stones like carnelian or lapis. They might bear your family's emblem, your horoscope, or a dedication to your household deity. Some even had little bells or tiny charms dangling from the handle. Because what's a wedding gift if it doesn't jingle a little? The merchant tells you, proudly, that he sold a spoon to a palace scribe last week. A gift for his daughter's wedding. The handle, he says, was shaped like a sycamore tree, the symbol of shelter and longevity. She wept when she opened it. Apparently, her last suitor brought nothing but figs. You walk on, spoon in hand, passing more wedding guests nursing hangovers with thick yogurt drinks and gossip. You overhear someone snort, "Of course she married him. Did you see his dowry spoons?" Turns out, spoons were even listed in dowries and prenuptial agreements. You imagine a stern father bartering with a groom's family. No spoon, no bride. And suddenly it doesn't sound so silly. It sounds strategic. In cities like Ugarit and Mari, Written contracts listed spoon sets along with land, livestock, and jewelry. A bronze spoon wasn't just a tool, it was leverage. And a silver one, that was social currency. Historians still argue whether these spoons served as actual legal tender in marriages or were simply high-value symbols used in rituals. Either way, they weren't optional. One scholar described them as emotional insurance, a tiny but tangible guarantee that the groom wasn't a complete slouch. Now picture a grand hall in Khatna. Palm-shaded courtyards, decorative fountains, murals painted with lapis dust. A young woman, probably younger than you, is receiving her dowry in front of the whole family. Silk veils, musicians, the usual controlled chaos. But when her mother opens the dowry box, it's not the necklace everyone gasps at. It's the spoons, hand-forged, each one carved with a verse from a harvest hymn. You feel a flicker of surprise. Something that simple, so domestic, could be elevated to art. But that's the thing. In a culture where hospitality was everything and feasts were sacred, the tools of food sharing meant something. A spoon wasn't just a utensil, it was an extension of the hand, a way of nourishing not just the body but the bond. You pass a stone wall where a relief carving shows a woman holding out a spoon to a child. The style is old, even for this time, maybe from the early Amorite period. The child's face is serene. The spoon is oversized, stylized, almost ceremonial. You wonder, was this a goddess? A mortal mother? Or maybe, just maybe, both. Later, as the sun climbs higher and the city begins to sweat under the weight of its own history, you wander into a wealthier quarter. Clay homes painted with lime plaster, shaded walkways. The sound of a stringed lyre drifts from an open window. You're ushered into a home for breakfast by a woman who clearly thinks you look underfed. She serves you barley porridge, steaming, sweetened with dates, and hands you a spoon unlike any you've held. It's shaped like a shell with a delicately twisted handle. "From my wedding," she says. "His family didn't have much. But this, he made himself." You hold it gently. It feels warm even though it's been resting on a cold stone tray. People say love languages are timeless, words, gifts, acts of service. But in ancient Syria, maybe it was all about the spoon. The city air changes as you leave the residential streets behind. It's quieter now, fewer merchants, more murmured prayers. The paving stones are worn smoother here, as if every footstep over the centuries has helped polish them. You're heading toward one of Ebla's oldest temple complexes, following the sound of ceremonial bells and the smell of something both sweet and smoky. Frankincense, probably, and maybe roasted chickpeas. It's hard to tell. You're not crashing a regular festival. This is a temple wedding, part ritual, part theater, all spectacle. Here, beneath pillars engraved with symbols of fertility, war, and harvest, a priest and priestess reenact the divine marriage of Baal and Anat, the storm god and the warrior goddess. Think mythic soap opera meets sacred fertility rite, with way more barley than drama. You blend into the crowd, watching as dancers swirl around a couple kneeling before a stone altar. Their garments are stiff with embroidery, dyed with pomegranate and crushed beetles, which honestly sounds worse than it looks. A choir hums something low and resonant. Then, as the priest chants, someone steps forward. Not with a ring, but with a spoon. You blink. Yep, a spoon. It's long, flat, and made of hammered gold, with an engraving of a wheat stalk running up the handle. The priest dips it into a shallow bowl of honey and lets a single drop fall onto the couple's joined hands. A blessing. Sweetness, fertility, unity. The crowd sighs like it's watching fireworks. Here's the thing. Grains and gods were inseparable in ancient Syrian culture. Agricultural fertility and human fertility. Same package deal. Weddings weren't just a family affair. they were cosmic events. The joining of two people echoed the mythic joining of divine pairs, often performed in temples to ensure both social order and good harvests. And the spoon, it was the symbol of nourishment, the tool that united field and family. Without it, all that wheat was just wheat. You needed a spoon to share it, to feed with it. And in the rituals of the time, sharing food wasn't just bonding, it was invoking divine favor. A spoon wasn't a utensil, it was a conduit. You edge closer, squinting at the altar behind the couple. Alongside the traditional offerings, jars of beer, pomegranates, and flatbread, there are, more spoons. 3 of them, each resting on a small pillow. One carved from ivory, another inlaid with turquoise, and the third shaped like a crescent moon. A nearby acolyte notices your curiosity and mutters, "One for the past, one for the present, one for the womb." You don't ask for clarification. Some metaphors are better left to the imagination. But here's something not many people talk about. These spoons weren't just symbolic. They were also seen as magical, protective. In some rural traditions, a bride would sleep with a spoon under her pillow the night before the ceremony to stir away evil dreams. There are even rare texts, more like superstitious manuals, that suggest stirring a wedding stew in the wrong direction could curse the firstborn with crooked teeth. Naturally, the priest always stirred clockwise. Historians still debate whether these temple spoon rituals originated in urban centers like Ebla, or if they were absorbed from older rural fertility cults. Some argue it all began with earth goddess worship in Neolithic Syria, where early farmers thanked the land with carved spoons and bowls. Others say the temples just adapted a good PR strategy. Take what the villagers love and give it a divine facelift. Either way, by the time you're offered a seat near the temple's central court, the tradition is firmly baked into the social pie. You sit beside a scribe who points out that even the gods, in myth, were said to eat together using specially forged spoons, often gifts from mortals hoping for favor. "Imagine writing a prayer on a spoon," he says with a smirk, "and then eating stew with it. Talk about multitasking." He pulls out a tiny clay tablet, smaller than your palm. On it, a record from decades ago, a donation from a family to the temple, including grain, a pair of goats, and a pair of wedding spoons, blessed for fertility. It reads like a divine wedding registry. You glance up just as the priestess waves a smoking branch over the couple. A final chant, a burst of lyre music, and the couple is declared bound, not just to each other, but to the land, the gods, and the feast that's about to begin. The crowd surges into a shaded courtyard lined with date palms. Stone tables creak under the weight of roasted meats, vegetables, and steaming porridge. Spoons, big ones for serving, delicate ones for ceremony, are everywhere. You try not to drop yours, but it's hard when someone just handed you a goblet of what tastes like barley wine and regret. There's laughter, clapping, and a strange dessert that might be cheese or something much, much weirder. And at every table, someone is showing off a spoon, this one shaped like a lion, that one painted with red ochre symbols, another carved to look like 2 birds kissing. You realize with a slow, amused smile that this is the status symbol, the flex, the quiet boast. Forget chariots and rings. Here in the land of wheat and wind gods, it's the spoon that says everything. And honestly, it kind of works. You wake up with the sun in your eyes and a faint smear of date paste on your cheek. Someone laid a thin blanket over you during the temple feast. Kindness or passive-aggressive hint, you'll never know. A wooden spoon rests in your hand like a souvenir you didn't mean to keep. You stretch, stiff from sleeping against a column, and make your way toward the city's artisan quarter. If weddings were the stage, this was the backstage, the smoke-filled, soot-smeared world where spoons were actually born. The clang of hammers and hiss of heated metal greet you before you turn the corner. Workshops line the dusty road, each one busier than the last. Bronze is the metal of the day, though you catch glimmers of silver and even the rare dull gleam of electrum. Part gold, part silver, all money. Inside one workshop, two boys pump a goat-hide bellows while an older man shapes molten bronze in a mold that's, yep, spoon-shaped. He doesn't glance up. "Wedding?" he asks, more a statement than a question. You nod. He spits into the coals and shrugs. "We made 10 spoons for the last one. 10. Her father must be terrified of bad luck." This is your introduction to the craft of spoon-giving, a process far more intricate and meaningful than you'd imagined. Spooning isn't just a post-dinner activity in this era. It's an art form, and a high-stakes one. A master metalworker shows you the 3 standard wedding spoon shapes: the fertile crescent, with its wide bowl and flared handle, the noble dip, thinner and deeply curved, and the rare whispering ladle, which has a long, hollow stem said to carry secret messages if you blow through it. Yes, really. That last one was apparently a flirtation device used in elite circles. Historians still argue whether that's literal or metaphor. There's limited proof anyone successfully whispered through a spoon. Still, it's charming to imagine a bride subtly tooting sweet nothings during a banquet, while her in-laws pretend not to notice. Every step of spoon-making here carries weight. The mold is lined with soft clay and ash, shaped to precise measurements passed down through generations. The bronze mixture is tested by sight and smell, not instruments. One spoonsmith insists that if the metal doesn't smell like rain on stone, it won't hold blessings. You pause to trace the carving on a finished spoon's handle, a spiral common in this region. A symbol of continuity, the artisan explains, a life that loops but moves forward. Good for weddings, also good for not cursing the kitchen. It turns out different regions had their own spoon dialects. In the limestone highlands, brides received utensils carved from fragrant wood, olive, cedar, or sycamore. In coastal cities like Byblos, glass-inlaid spoons sparkled like the sea and were often given in pairs with matching olive picks. Inland, nomadic tribes forged iron spoons with practical handles that doubled as bottle openers. Okay, technically oil jar openers, but still, versatility counts. You even meet a man who claims to specialize in prank spoons, gifts made to look sacred but secretly melt when placed in hot stew. He says with a wink, "It's how the bride knows if the groom has a sense of humor." You don't ask how many weddings he's accidentally ruined. At one stall, you spot a display labeled "Spoons for All Stars," each one etched with constellations and planetary glyphs. Astrological spoons were huge among upper-class Syrian families. A bride born under Venus might receive a spoon shaped like a morning star. One born under Saturn. Something with more serious angles and probably a built-in backstory about patience. A merchant laughs when you pick up a stubby little number with a fish on the end. Pisces, she says. Sensitive, moody, prone to oversalting lentils. Suddenly, your plain wooden spoon feels a little underwhelming. But in truth, the material of the spoon said as much as the design. Bronze was middle tier, respectable, enduring. Bone, humble but heartfelt. Gold, flashy, sometimes tacky, often hollow. You hear of one groom who gifted an elaborate gold spoon that turned out to be foil over fired clay. His marriage reportedly lasted 3 weeks. Apparently, you can fake your dowry but not your sincerity. You sit with a spoonsmith whose hands are black with soot and wisdom. He offers tea brewed in a battered copper pot. "See, the trick," he says, "is not just how it looks, it's how it balances. If it tips too easily, it's no good. Marriage is like that, eh?" He laughs, nudging a spoon so it rocks, then steadies. Good spoon. Good wife. And then, almost as an afterthought, he pulls a cloth from a high shelf. Inside, a spoon carved from translucent alabaster. It gleams like frozen honey. Only for priestesses, he says softly. Used in the bread blessing ritual. Can't be bought, can't be sold. But one girl, long ago, gave hers to her husband on their wedding night. You exhale. It's not just craft, it's intimacy. A spoon can carry symbolism, but it can also carry memory. Maybe even love. You tuck your own spoon deeper into your satchel. It's not much, just wood, a little dented. But it was given to you without fanfare, without price. Maybe that's the whole point. The sun slants westward now, painting everything in gold. You've wandered far from the heart of the city, where palace steps glitter and priests chant. Out here, the streets are quieter, earthier. Chickens dart between crumbling walls. You pass a child drawing spirals in the dirt with, you guessed it, a bent bronze spoon. At first glance, it looks like any rural neighborhood. Adobe homes, dusty courtyards, a scent of onions in the air. But these alleys hum with something deeper. You're entering the domain of village traditions, the kind that cities borrow and temples try to codify, but never quite capture. A wedding procession winds its way toward you. It's smaller than the ones in the palace, louder in a different way. Women ululate, men clap rhythmically, and a couple walks slowly beneath a canopy of hand-stitched fabric. Their hands are bound together with red-dyed wool, and dangling from the groom's belt are two oversized wooden spoons, each painted with little suns. One of the women sees you watching and pulls you into the line without asking. You fall into rhythm, stepping over goat pellets and wild thyme, wondering again. Why spoons? The answer bubbles up during the feast, held in a neighbor's courtyard under a grapevine trellis. You're handed a bowl of something thick and steaming, and as you reach for your spoon, an old woman stops you. Use this, she says, offering a long-handled wooden spoon. Passed down from my mother, wedding spoon, makes the food taste luckier. The spoon is smooth from generations of use, the handle carved with simple lines. No jewels, no gods, just history. Her voice softens. Every woman gets one on her wedding day, something to stir the soup and the soul. She's not being poetic. In these rural communities, the spoon was often the most practical of all wedding gifts. Before dowries became court documents and spoons became engraved status pieces, they were survival tools. You married someone? You got a spoon. Because love is nice, but lentils won't stir themselves. One fringe theory says the tradition may even predate marriage as we know it. Some anthropologists argue that communal eating from shared dishes and the tools passed between women formed the earliest markers of bonded households. Forget rings. A spoon meant you were part of someone's pot. Historians still argue whether this rural spoon tradition influenced urban rituals or if it was the other way around. Did the villagers invent the custom, only for city elites to polish it up and call it sacred? Or did priests popularize the symbolism and the countryside ran with it in their own style? Either way, out here, the symbolism never left the table. Literally. During the feast, a small play is performed by the bride's siblings. It's a parody of the couple's first meal together. The bride pretends to burn the stew, the groom tries to stir it with a stick, and the punchline comes when a child runs in with a wedding spoon. Everyone cheers, the couple pretends to kiss, and someone throws chickpeas. The spoon, again, is the punchline and the prize. After dinner, an elder brings out a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside are spoons from 3 generations, each one marked with initials or family symbols. We keep them, she says, in case the house ever burns down. They're the first thing we'd grab. The grain can be replaced. The spoon, that's harder. There's even a whisper of superstition in the air. One neighbor swears she conceived twins the night her mother-in-law gifted her a cedar spoon. Another says she stirs clockwise during full moons and never, ever stirs stew without singing under her breath. You're beginning to see it, aren't you? The spoon wasn't just for food, it was for continuity. A link from mother to daughter, wife to household, past to future. You stir today with the same shape your grandmother held. You might paint yours with different patterns or wrap the handle in dyed yarn, but the gesture? That's ancient. One story floats through the circle as the fire dies down. About a bride who lost her husband in war before they could share their first meal. She kept his wedding spoon by her bed for the rest of her life, using it only once a year on their would-be anniversary. You don't ask if it's true. You just watch the old woman's eyes as she tells it, and that's enough. Before you leave, someone hands you a spoon carved from a pale rootwood. Simple, unadorned. Gift, they say, so you don't leave empty-handed. You hesitate, unsure if you should accept it, but they smile. It's a spare. It only stirs sweet things. You tuck it away carefully. Not for display, for memory. Because out here, away from the palaces and altars, the spoon is still what it was meant to be. Something humble, helpful, and handed down with love. The road leading out of the village winds like a lazy stream, bordered by wheat fields that ripple with the wind. You walk slowly now, your satchel heavier with wooden heirlooms, and your brain spinning from barley wine and oral history. But you're not alone. In the distance, the sound of hooves draws near. A caravan approaches, merchants traveling from Mari, their donkeys piled high with baskets, textiles, and bundles of copper. You step aside, letting them pass, until one of them pauses and waves you over. You look like you've seen too many weddings, he jokes, offering a dried fig. You chew thoughtfully as he opens a leather pouch and pulls out. Yep, another spoon. But this one's different. It's carved from bone, feather-light, and painted with geometric patterns in deep crimson. Wedding gift from Mari, he says. We sell them in pairs. One to stir, one to serve. He winks. 2 spoons, 1 kitchen. You laugh. But it's not just a joke. In Mari, a city of river routes and scribes, the double spoon tradition was a real thing. Archaeologists have uncovered marriage contracts that list not just dowry values and livestock, but also specific spoon sets gifted from both sides of the family. You hear about one clay tablet that lists, alongside 3 goats and a bronze lamp, a pair of marriage spoons with blue stone inlay for feasting and fasting. Apparently, even dietary balance was romantic back then. One fringe inscription claims that Mari's nobility believed certain spoons carried weight of oath, meaning a vow spoken while holding the spoon was considered binding, legally and spiritually. If that's true, there's a chance some couples swore loyalty not just by word, but by cutlery. Historians still argue whether this spoon oath thing was widely practiced or just a ceremonial oddity, maybe specific to priestly families. But you can't help picturing 2 nervous teenagers reciting marriage promises while clinging to spoons like lifelines. It's weirdly wholesome. As the caravan halts for the night, you're invited to sit around their fire. One merchant plays a reed flute while another stirs a pot of lentils. The ladle he uses? Copper with a handle shaped like a twisted rope. He catches you staring and chuckles. From a blacksmith near the Euphrates. Said it would bring twins. You raise an eyebrow. He grins. My wife said if I bring home twins, I'm sleeping in the barn. Over flatbread and stories, you learn more about spoon customs that traveled along these trade routes. The Assyrians preferred long-handled spoons with flat bowls, ideal for skimming broth. The Mitanni. They favored carved ivory, often shaped like lotus blossoms or stylized birds. Some were so fragile they were clearly never used, gifts meant for display, not dinner. And in one of the more bizarre regional quirks, a coastal group along the Mediterranean reportedly made edible spoons from hardened barley paste. The idea was to stir a bride's porridge with a spoon she could then eat. Sort of romantic, sort of soggy. But it wasn't just the spoons themselves that mattered, it was how they were given. One merchant tells you of a tradition where the groom had to carve the spoon himself, using wood from a tree planted on the day of his betrothal. No spoon, no bride. You stare at him, half expecting a punchline. He just shrugs. Took me 2 years, first spoon broke in half. She married me anyway. That spoon, he adds, still sits in their kitchen. Not for use, for memory. As night deepens and the stars spread across the desert sky like crushed salt, someone asks if you've ever seen a sleeping spoon. You shake your head. They pull out a tiny wooden spoon, barely longer than your thumb, with a curve too shallow to hold anything. Not for food, they whisper. For dreams. You keep it under your pillow on your wedding night, so your dreams stir in the right direction. One fringe legend suggests that brides in Mari would place 3 of these tiny spoons under the bed. One for love, one for children, one for protection. And if one went missing by morning, it was considered a sign. A bad one. You lie awake a little longer that night, wrapped in your blanket beside the fire, listening to the soft clink of metal and wood as the merchants pack up for the next day's journey. In the flickering light, someone stirs the embers with the back of a bronze spoon, and for a second, it looks like a tiny comet trailing sparks. You wonder how many hands that spoon has passed through, how many vows it's heard, how many soups it's cooled. And you realize something simple but oddly profound. In a world of temples and kings, of scrolls and stone, it's often the humble things, the wooden, the chipped, the passed down, that carry the most story. A spoon is just a tool, sure, but in ancient Syria it was also a hope, a bond, a tiny promise tucked between bites. A spoon is just a tool, sure, but in ancient Syria it was also a hope, a bond, a tiny promise tucked between bites. You close your eyes to the sound of laughter, somewhere out of frame. Maybe there's another wedding in the next village. Maybe there's a bride stirring stew right now, with a spoon painted by her mother, whispering a prayer into the steam. And maybe, just maybe, that prayer will hold. You wake with sand on your lips and the slow realization that you've been dreaming about ladles. Real ladles. Big, ceremonial, too heavy to use ones. Not exactly romantic, unless you're into surrealist kitchenware. The caravan's long gone by now, leaving only hoof prints and a few orange peels. But you're not alone. A small cluster of pilgrims is passing by, cloaked in linen and sunburn, heading toward a nearby temple nestled in the foothills. One of them offers you a place in the line. You walk like someone who's been gifted too many spoons, she says, smiling. You laugh, but your satchel is starting to clink when you move. As you fall into step, she begins to talk, softly, reverently, about the temple ahead. It's one of the few that still keeps the spoon rites, she says. They serve a sacred stew there every new moon. Only married couples are allowed to stir it. That's not a metaphor. They literally hand each couple a long-handled spoon, ceremonial, carved from olive wood and wrapped in red thread, and invite them to stir a pot of lentils as priests chant blessings. You feel like you're walking into a cooking class designed by mystics. At the temple gates, you remove your sandals and enter a cool stone courtyard shaded by fig trees and echoing with birdsong. Incense curls upward in slow ribbons. You follow the scent to a side chamber where a priestess is preparing the stew. It's simple, lentils, garlic, cumin, but the air around it feels charged. The food is not the blessing, she tells you. The stirring is. She hands you a spoon to feel its weight. It's heavier than it looks, with grooves that fit your fingers like they've been waiting centuries for your grip. Along the handle, a faint carving, a pair of eyes. They watch, she explains, symbol of mutual care. You stir while being seen. That's the marriage bond. As married couples file in, you watch the ritual unfold. Each pair takes a turn, dipping the spoon into the bubbling pot with slow, synchronized movements. Some are graceful, others a bit clumsy. There's one couple that nearly drops the thing in completely and laughs so hard they get side-eyed by a priest. But all are treated with quiet reverence. One fringe belief says the number of times you stir together during this rite directly correlates with the years of peace in your marriage. Stir 5 times in harmony, earn 5 years of marital calm. Stir out of sync, and you might just argue over olives before sunset. Historians still argue whether the stew rite dates back to the old Babylonian period, or if it was a later temple innovation meant to blend spiritual ritual with everyday life. The earliest inscription referencing it simply says, "May they stir with one hand and eat with 2 hearts." Poetic? Yes. Verifiable? Not even close. After the ritual, the stew is ladled into humble bowls and served beneath the open sky. You sit cross-legged, listening to stories. One older man tells of how he and his wife kept their temple spoon by the door, using it to settle arguments. "Whoever picks it up first gets to speak," he says. "That's the rule." Another woman laughs and adds, "Unless you throw it at their head." That's the other rule. Even in these sacred spaces, the spoon isn't some untouchable artifact. It's part of the domestic orbit, used, dropped, scrubbed, kissed. One priest says the most holy spoon in the temple's collection once spent a week under a donkey because the bride who brought it forgot where she put it. Still blessed, he shrugs. As the sun lowers and the shadows lengthen across the mosaic floors, you're invited to visit the temple's Gallery of Gifts, a chamber filled with wedding offerings donated over generations. Most are spoons, all kinds. A spoon carved from obsidian, so dark it drinks light. One made of shell, delicate as lace. A twin-handled silver spoon, shaped like 2 figures holding hands across the bowl. Each one tells a story, some of love, some of loss, some of stubbornness. One spoon bears an inscription in a shaky hand. "She hated stew. I loved her anyway." You linger in front of that one the longest. On your way out, the priestess offers you a small clay token stamped with a spoon symbol. "For your next meal," she says, "remember to stir slowly." You nod, slipping it into your pocket. Outside, the wind picks up, rustling the trees, and for a moment you feel the world soften, as if something sacred and silly has fused in the air around you. A spoon, given in love, blessed in stew, watched by carved eyes, kissed by lentils and laughter. It's absurd and perfect. You start walking again, spoon token warm in your palm. And behind you, in that sun-soaked temple, another couple begins to stir. The road veers east now, where the hills rise gently and the villages thin out. You pass olive groves where goats graze like they own the place, and shepherds hum lullabies that don't seem to care whether anyone's listening. You follow a path etched more by foot than by design, eventually leading to a small settlement, more stone than clay, more silence than song. It's older here, not just in architecture but in atmosphere. You get the sense that time moves differently among these stones, slower, deeper, like it's soaking into the ground. You find yourself invited, again, to a wedding. By now, this is starting to feel suspiciously like a setup. But you roll with it, because this one's different. This one's matriarchal. Here, the women run things. Property, decisions, the village council, even the brewing schedule. And of course, the wedding gifts. Spoons are still given. But here, the bride gives the spoon to the groom. Singular. Custom-made. carved by her or by someone in her maternal line. You're shown one by a woman with fingers calloused from years of weaving and spoon whittling. It's broad, with a short handle, and a leaf pattern etched across the bowl. To remind him who grows the food, she says, not quite joking. The ceremony is short. No priests, just the village gathering in a circle, while the bride speaks her vows aloud and hands over the spoon. The groom takes it with 2 hands, then places it in a small niche carved into their future home. Only once it's in place does the feast begin. There's something intimate about the ritual. Less spectacle, more statement. A simple transfer of trust in the form of a household tool. One quirky local belief: if a groom drops the spoon before hanging it, it's a sign he'll be clumsy in fatherhood. Not necessarily a bad omen, just a signal that he'd better get used to cleaning up spills. Historians still argue whether this matriarchal spoon-giving was common across ancient Syria or unique to isolated hill communities. Some scholars point to similar practices in Anatolia and even as far east as Elam. Others say it's an anomaly, proof that even in a patriarchal world, power sometimes trickled in unexpected directions. And the symbolism doesn't stop at the gifting. These spoons are used for stirring, yes, but also in small acts of family divination. On the new moon, the bride dips the spoon into water and observes the ripples. If they fan out smoothly, it's a good month ahead. If they wobble, hey, stay home, plant garlic. Some even hang the wedding spoon in the kitchen like a tiny oracle. If it spins slightly overnight, they say change is coming. If it falls, someone's coming over. If it's missing, check the goat pen. One family invites you into their home to see their ancestral spoons. 5 mounted in a row above the hearth, each with initials burned into the handles. That one belonged to my great-grandmother, the host explains. She once fed 13 people with a single pot of barley soup and that spoon. She said it wasn't magic, just patience. You nod, but the way everyone glances at the spoon afterward suggests there might have been a little magic involved. Over dinner, conversation turns to spoon-making. Here, it's a communal craft, passed down like a family secret. Girls learn to carve alongside their mothers. The ideal wood is mulberry, hard but forgiving, rich in pattern. No varnish, just oil and time. And while the spoons are functional, they're also quietly artistic. One features a fish winding its way down the handle. Another bears dots that, when read aloud, form a simple poem. Stir gently. Life is already thick enough. You can't help but think how little has changed. Today we give monogrammed wine glasses or his and hers spatulas. Back then, a spoon that feeds, warns, and maybe even flirts. Before you leave, the bride hands you a spoon of your own. Unfinished, its bowl rough, its handle plain. You carve your own meaning, she says. We all do, eventually. You pocket it carefully, imagining the first line you'd etch if you had the nerve. Back outside, the stars blink into view, the wind softer now, like it's exhaling. A baby cries in the distance. Somewhere, a couple laughs at a dropped ladle. And above every hearth in this village, a spoon hangs quietly, watching, waiting, remembering. You're walking farther now into drier land where the wind picks up dust like old secrets, and the scent of cumin rides the air. The villages here are fewer, tucked between hills that seem carved more by time than weather. And yet, even here, the spoons persist. The town you approach next is known for something else entirely: salt. Salt mines, salt markets, salt everything. But what really pulls you in is the story you overhear before you even reach the gates. A bride was gifted a spoon made of pure salt, then dissolved it in a wedding stew. You think, no way. But of course, you're wrong. You find her by a shaded stall where cured fish hang like wind chimes. She's young, but her hands are seasoned from work, her laugh quick and unapologetic. And when you ask her about the salt spoon, she beams. Gift from my uncle, she explains. He carved it with a goat horn knife. Took him 2 weeks. Said it would flavor our marriage. She pauses, eyes twinkling. So I used it for the soup at the wedding feast. It melted by the second serving. There's something poetic in that. A utensil that disappears as it fulfills its purpose. A gesture both practical and symbolic. Just like marriage, you think. It changes as it serves. But there's more. In this salt town, spoons are tied to protection. Local lore holds that if a couple stirs their first shared meal with a salt spoon, their love will preserve through rot. Unappetizing, maybe, but heartfelt. One fringe belief even claims that salt spoons prevent possession. Yes, demonic possession. Apparently, demons hate overseasoned broth. Honestly, who doesn't? The townsfolk might be joking, but they might not be. Historians still argue whether the salt spoon ritual was a regional curiosity or a lost link to early Mesopotamian purification rites. Some tablets hint at tools of cleansing, but no one's entirely sure if they referred to ladles, incense sticks, or metaphors wrapped in metaphors. The woman shows you a keepsake version of the spoon, wooden but inlaid with powdered salt, mixed into a resin. It's beautiful, glittering like frost. We don't eat with this one, she says. We hang it above the bed. You raise an eyebrow. To keep things spicy, she adds deadpan. You walk on, and salt gives way to stone as you approach the ruins of an older settlement. Here, archaeologists recently uncovered a dining room. Yes, a dining room, complete with a low table, painted walls, and an offering shelf stacked with miniature vessels. Among them, a spoon carved from alabaster, barely larger than a coin. They think it was part of a ritual feast. Possibly a marriage rite, given the fresco nearby, 2 figures facing each other over a steaming bowl. One has a spoon. The other, hands empty, palms up. What does it mean? Scholars debate. One theory is that the spoon-bearing figure represents sustenance, the other, vulnerability. Another thinks it's an artistic metaphor for roles in a relationship. One stirs, one receives, or maybe it's just an ancient artist having fun with still life drama. You sit on the edge of the crumbled room, imagining the couple it once celebrated. Did they argue about salt levels? Did one sneak extra dates into the stew? Nearby, a guide points out a curious trench lined with polished stones. Water channel, he explains. They'd wash utensils here, ceremonial cleaning. And there it is again, the blend of daily life and sacred moment. Stirring, cooking, serving, acts we repeat 1,000 times in a lifetime, turned symbolic by repetition, attention, love. Later that evening, you share a meal with a family in the town's upper quarter. Their daughter just married, and they proudly bring out the wedding spoon, a 2-headed design with bowls on both ends. So we always serve each other first, the mother says. They pass it around for fun. You pretend to take a bite and nearly drop it. It's awkward to balance. They laugh and tell you that's the point. Marriage is a little clumsy at first. The youngest child tells you a local bedtime tale, 2 spoon spirits who live in every wedding kitchen. One stirs love, the other stirs mischief. If you feed both, your marriage stays interesting. If you neglect them, you'll find your stew mysteriously burned. You tuck that one away. As night falls, you rest near a dry riverbed, the stars louder here than the breeze. You take out the salt resin spoon the bride gave you earlier and set it on a flat rock beside your blanket. The moon catches it just right, and for a moment, it glows. A spoon that seasons as it disappears. A spoon that wards off demons and flavors devotion. A spoon that begins as a gift and ends as a blessing. You pull your blanket tighter. Somewhere, someone is falling in love over soup. And if they're lucky, they're using a spoon that tells a story. You wake to the sound of something being stirred. Not a breeze, not bird song, but an actual ladle scraping gently against the inside of a clay pot. Your eyes open, and you find yourself in a narrow courtyard surrounded by 4 modest homes and one communal kitchen where a woman with streaks of silver in her braid is humming as she cooks. "Morning," she says without turning. "You've missed the stirring." You're about to apologize when she slides a small bowl toward you. Stew, of course. Lentils and lamb this time, thick with coriander. You sit cross-legged beside the fire pit, spoon in hand before you've even noticed. Instinct. Muscle memory. Or maybe, at this point, spoon-related prophecy. The woman, who introduces herself as Lena, nods toward the wall behind you. You turn, expecting decorations or painted tiles. What you see instead is a vertical rack of 12 spoons, each one distinct, carved, painted, even one inlaid with broken glass. 12 marriages, she says, one for every full moon of the year. It's a local tradition you've not encountered yet. Here, every couple receives not one spoon, but 12, one for each month of shared life. The first is gifted at the wedding, and each month afterward a new one is added, either by a family member, friend, or sometimes by the couple themselves. It sounds like a lot of spoons, until you realize how much changes over a year. The first spoon might serve joy, the second, disappointment. By the time you get to spoon number 9, you might need something sturdier, stainless steel, say, for all the emotional scraping. One spoon here is wrapped in copper wire. That was during our hardest month, Lena says. We didn't speak for a week, but we still ate together. There's tenderness in her voice, not the romantic kind, but the kind that comes from weathering storms and still showing up for dinner. One fringe tradition. Some couples bury the 12th spoon at the end of the year as a symbolic act of letting go. Then they start again with a new set. A way to say, we've survived and we're starting fresh. But we remember. Historians still argue whether the 12-spoon practice emerged from calendar rituals or agricultural festivals. Some speculate it's rooted in the lunar cycles, given how closely the full moons were tied to planting, harvesting, and, apparently, emotional milestones. A local scribe once tried to formalize the symbolism. Spoon 1 equals hope. Spoon 2 equals adjustment. Spoon 3 equals compromise. By spoon 5, you're deep into shared exhaustion, and spoon 11 is either acceptance or revenge, depending on the translation. You sip your stew and realize this isn't just about wedding gifts. This is a full-blown spoon-based philosophy of life. A teenage girl joins you, Lena's granddaughter maybe. She's carving something from soft wood. You ask what it is. Month 5, she replies. For my cousin. They just argued for 3 days about building a chicken coop. She's smiling, though. Not mocking, just observing the great cosmic truth. Relationships get weird. She holds up the spoon. Its handle is shaped like a ladder. To remind them it's worth climbing back up, she explains. Later that day, you're invited to a spoon review ceremony, which sounds like something HR invented, but is actually a quiet, meaningful tradition. Couples bring their year's collection, lay them out on cloth, and talk through their year together. Each spoon becomes a marker of time. One still has burn marks, another was snapped and glued back together. A third was gifted by the groom's mother, its handle stained with date syrup and bittersweet affection. Some people trade spoons with other couples. You survived spoon 8 too? Yeah, the one with the illness. Oof, solidarity, friend. The ceremony isn't public like the wedding, but it's more intimate. Here the focus isn't on the promise, it's on the follow-through. And here's a quirky twist. One couple tells you they deliberately made their month 10 spoon tiny. teaspoon-sized, because we couldn't handle any more that month. Just small bites. That tiny spoon sits on their wall next to a massive ladle from month 12. That was our comeback month, they say proudly. You realize something as you walk through the village that night. These people have found a way to track time not just by stars or harvests, but by what was shared at the table. Who stirred, who served, who stayed, even when things got soupy. Before bed, Lena hands you a spoon of your own. It's plain, with a small notch near the bowl. For your first spoon month, she says. You ask what the notch is for. To remind you not to rush. That's where most things spill. You lie down beside the courtyard's hearth, spoon tucked under your arm like a bookmark in the story you're still learning to read. 12 spoons, 12 chapters, one quiet promise. Stir slowly, eat together, keep going. The sun's already high by the time you're back on your feet, spoon in hand like it's become part of your gear. Wallet, keys, phone, ancestral marriage spoon. You trudge east, feet crunching over dry grass and brittle seed husks. Somewhere in the distance, a drumbeat rises and falls, too slow to be a war signal, too fast to be a funeral. You're heading toward music, and, as always, food. The village comes into view slowly. Mud brick homes nestled in a dusty plain, with woven awnings stretched between them like sleepy hammocks. Today's a festival day. You walk into it without quite knowing what it's for. People are laughing, scattering rose petals, carrying platters of dried figs and spicy chickpeas, and, curiously, passing around large wooden spoons like batons in a relay race. One woman, sweating through a beautifully embroidered tunic, grabs you by the wrist and presses a spoon into your palm. Don't drop it, she warns, or you'll curse the next couple. No pressure. This is the rite of the passing spoon, a local tradition where couples nearing engagement, or those celebrating wedding anniversaries, join in a ceremonial spoon pass through the town. Think of it as a romantic relay, but with more cumin. The spoon itself is a monster carved from olive wood, about 2 feet long, and covered in years of carvings, initials, and cryptic symbols that might be ancient prayers, or just inside jokes from 400 BC. You follow the chain of passing, noting how seriously everyone treats it. Each handoff is solemn, with a quiet whisper exchanged, usually something encouraging, or sarcastic. You hear one old woman mutter, "Good luck surviving spoon number 4, and cackle as the younger couple accepts the token. One standout feature, the spoon always moves right to left. No one remembers why. One theory says it mimics the direction of the moon. Another claims it's a reference to old script direction. Or maybe, as one teen speculates, it's just harder for right-handed people, and relationships are supposed to be challenging. Historians still argue whether the passing spoon ceremony originated in marital rituals or seasonal rites that got romantically rebranded over centuries. Some see it as a survival of Babylonian procession customs, where tools were blessed in public. Others think it's purely symbolic, a physical metaphor for handing over responsibility, affection, or maybe just the cooking chores. One thing's for sure, if you drop the spoon, you owe the entire town a feast. That rule is documented. You're ushered to a long communal table after the circuit is complete. Couples sit across from one another, and in the middle of each pair sits a spoon, sometimes the one just passed, sometimes a new one. This next tradition, the first stir test. Each couple takes a bowl of stew, lentils, chicken, whatever's bubbling in the shared pot, and stirs it together, both holding the spoon at the same time. The goal: reach a rhythm. It's like a trust fall, but with more risk of getting pepper in your eye. If they stir in sync, the crowd applauds. If they splash the stew, people chuckle knowingly. One couple, who seem like they've done this for decades, stirs in perfect circles, never looking down. just smiling. You hear someone whisper, "They were spoon champions in '79. The fringe superstition tied to this: if the spoon rotates counterclockwise on its own after the couple releases it, their union will outlast even famine. If it falls flat, well, better luck next harvest." And here's a fun fact you didn't see coming. They sing to the spoons. Not every day, just during the ceremony. Short little verses, mostly about boiling water, love thicker than yogurt, and the power of letting someone else stir once in a while. One child belts a line that translates roughly to, "My love is like lentils, plain, but it fills you." Applause erupts. You are once again amazed that no one in your culture ever thought to serenade utensils. After lunch, the giant communal spoon is ritually washed in a copper basin and wrapped in wool. It's stored in the central home until next year. We keep it warm, they say, like any good memory. Later that night, you sit with one of the elder spoon bearers, an 84-year-old man who once carved spoons in exchange for goats. "The first one I made," he recalls, "was for a friend too shy to propose. He gave her the spoon with the stew he cooked. She said yes after the second bite. You ask what he thinks spoons really symbolize. Control, he says, and surrender. Same time. You think about that as the stars prick holes in the dark sky and the fire dwindles to soft red embers. A spoon, humble, curved, persistent, becomes everything when passed from hand to hand. A memory, a commitment, a joke, a dare, a wish. And tonight, as the quiet settles in and the leftover bowls sit on porches waiting for morning, the village breathes a little deeper. No one dropped the spoon this year. You sleep deeper that night, maybe from the stew, maybe from the rhythmic chanting that lulled you toward dreams like waves lapping a dock. By morning, your legs ache. Not from walking, but from smiling too much. You didn't expect wedding spoons to become your entire personality, but here we are. Today you're headed uphill. Not a metaphor, actual climbing, the kind that makes your thighs argue with your lungs. The path winds toward a highland village where the stones are older than most empires and the clouds linger like gossip. This place, famous for spoon duels. Yes, you read that right. At first you think it's a joke. Then you see the arena, stone circle, raised seats, a ceremonial apron woven with images of spoons. Everywhere spoons, painted, stitched, carved. You even spot one with tiny wheels on the handle. Don't ask. The tradition goes something like this. Before a wedding is officially sealed, each partner enters the circle holding a wooden spoon. There are rules. No sharp edges, no flinging, no flourished stabs. This isn't combat. It's more like a stylized dance of taps, blocks, and parries. The goal is to show understanding, timing, humor. A judge watches closely, scoring points for cleverness, cooperation, and culinary synergy. Whatever that means. The crowd seems to know. They cheer loudly when one move looks like stirring while dodging emotional baggage. According to a fringe belief here, couples who duel with grace will cook with harmony for life. If someone breaks their spoon, bad omen. A snapped handle means emotional rigidity. A chipped bowl, a lack of empathy. One poor lad once flung his spoon mid-duel, hit a chicken, and got dumped before the officiant could say, "I do." Historians still argue whether these duels stemmed from ancient martial rites or parody traditions meant to mock aristocratic rituals. Some connect them to early fertility dances, noting the curious pelvic emphasis in the footwork. Others think it started because a pot broke, someone grabbed 2 spoons in panic, and the rest is chaotic history. You watch a match unfold. 2 brides this time. They circle slowly, then clink their spoons in time to a slow drum beat. They laugh. One fakes a drop. The other catches it mid-air. The crowd erupts. The judge throws a rose petal. Apparently, that's a perfect score. Afterward, you talk to them. The duel was our way of saying we're ready for the work, one says. Spoons are honest. They don't let you fake rhythm. Later in the day, you're shown the village spoon archive. Yes, a whole room filled with ceremonial spoons going back centuries. Some are so old they've been fossilized into clay tablets. Others hang from silk cords, tagged with love stories like museum captions. Married during the locust year, still together. Eloped, this spoon is the only witness. Divorced after spoon duel rematch, no regrets. One wooden spoon has silver inlays shaped like vines, each leaf representing a year survived. The couple added a new leaf each spring for 37 years, then stopped. The spoon was donated by their granddaughter. You're handed a replica and invited to carve a leaf of your own. Even if it's just for today, the elder says. You scratch in a small, wobbly leaf and feel oddly connected to people you'll never meet. That evening, you're invited to a pre-wedding feast. Everyone eats from shared bowls, but with personal spoons. There's one rule. You must stir someone else's bowl before touching your own. It's more than custom. It's performance. A metaphor for prioritizing each other. A way to say, I'll taste your needs before serving myself. Sometimes it's romantic. Sometimes it's awkward, but always intentional. You mess it up, of course. Stir your own bowl by accident. The table gasps dramatically. You apologize profusely and are mock-banished to the single cushion, where other spoon sinners eat alone. You're laughing, but also learning. One older man joins you. It's just stew, he says kindly, but how you stir it says everything. Before bed, you peek into the arena again. It's empty now, moonlight draping over the stone. 2 practice spoons lie on the sand, crossed. You pick one up, feel the balance in your hand, the smoothness worn in by use, not decoration. You pretend to duel a shadow, dancing lightly, stirring the invisible air. You're not sure when spoons became so much more than eating tools. Maybe around the time you realized that stirring, feeding, serving, these are love languages too. Not the flashy ones, the quiet, every meal kind, the kind that says, I see you. Here's something warm. Morning comes, sharp and blue and a little smug about it. You're up before the rooster, which is a personal best, and you've become the kind of person who checks their spoon before their shoes. You tuck it into your belt. Yes, you're that committed. And follow the scent of cardamom and cedar smoke downhill to your next stop, the city of Al-Kashari. This place is older, louder, and definitely more theatrical. If The Last Village was a quiet poem, Al-Kashari is a Broadway musical about cutlery. You're here for the spoon playwrights. See, in this city, wedding spoons aren't just carved, they're dramatized. Every year, around the summer solstice, couples commission short plays based on how they met. These are performed with spoons as puppets. Yes, puppet theater, with spoons. You sit on a woven mat between a giggling toddler and an elderly man chewing something aggressively spiced, and the curtain lifts on a small wooden stage. Out come the spoon characters, one tall and slender, clearly the nervous groom spoon, another short with a painted fringe of walnut dye, playing the dramatic bride spoon. They meet, they argue, they dance. They almost split up over a stew-related misunderstanding. Then they reconcile during a thunderstorm and serve soup to an orphan. The crowd is weeping. Some spoon dramas are slapstick, others deeply philosophical. One explores the existential dread of being a serving spoon when you dreamed of soup. Too real. The most famous play in the region, The Spoon of Forgetting, follows a couple who misplace their wedding spoon and slowly lose memories of each other until they find it buried in their garden, at which point they remember they hate olives but love each other. This storytelling tradition is more than entertainment. It's a form of vow rehearsal. Couples work with local playwrights to turn their story into something communal. Not just, we met at a festival, but let's show how we stirred the same pot and made something edible. According to a fringe practice here, if your spoon play makes someone in the audience laugh, cry, and nod solemnly within 5 minutes, your marriage is considered emotionally fortified. Think of it as couples therapy, but with better lighting and puppets. Historians still argue whether this tradition originated from ancient temple rituals or guild theater in the bronze markets. Some trace its roots to harvest festivals where tools were anthropomorphized to teach moral lessons. Others point out that it might have just started with a bored carver and a very animated lunch. After the show, you're ushered backstage. One puppet maker hands you a tiny spoon, no longer than your pinky. For your inner child, he says, dead serious, the part of you that still believes stories can fix things. You carry it in your palm for a while before tucking it into your belt next to the real spoon. Suddenly, your belt's feeling like a museum gift shop. That afternoon, you're invited to a spoon writing circle, sort of a romantic writer's room. Couples sit around low tables with blank spoons and sharp charcoal, scribbling poetry or private vows onto the handles. One woman writes, "I'll stir gently when you're tender." Another carves, "Even burnt stew tastes like home with you." You're handed a blank spoon and told to write your own line. No pressure. After 10 agonizing minutes, you go with, not always perfect, but always shared. Not bad for someone who once thought a spoon was just for yogurt. The locals also introduce you to the spoon vault. This is no dusty archive. It's a carved chamber beneath the oldest theater, lit by oil lamps and lined with thousands of spoon-shaped niches. Couples donate their story spoons after 25 years together. It's like a hall of fame, but quieter, warmer. Some are locked inside transparent clay capsules, like preserved time. Others have messages only visible in the right light. You hold one up and under the flame read, "We almost didn't make it through spoon 7." But he kept stirring. It's intimate and sacred, but also incredibly human. These aren't fairy tales. They're burn marks, splinters, the awkward dance of two people trying not to oversalt each other's lives. Here's a quirky local superstition. If you place your forehead gently against a spoon vault wall, you might hear a whisper from a long-gone couple. Encouragement. A recipe. Or, occasionally, a reminder to season your soup before boiling. Wisdom from beyond. You try it. Press your head to a cool stone niche. Nothing at first, then soft and sly. Never serve the first ladle to your mother-in-law. Duly noted. As evening rolls in, you're invited to a vow renewal at the open-air theater. 2 spoons are presented, one old and scorched, the other freshly carved. The couple holds both at once and recites their lines not to each other, but to the spoons. There's silence. Then someone hums a tune. It spreads, and just like that, the crowd is singing a soft lullaby to the spoons. A love song to the vessels of shared meals, awkward silences, and the joy of one more warm bite. You lie down later in a small courtyard, both spoons tucked beside you like bookends. The sky overhead is wide and loud with stars, and all you can think is, somewhere, someone just finished carving their first spoon. Somewhere else, someone is burying theirs. And in between, all the stories worth stirring. You wake up to distant drumming again, but this time it's softer, less celebration, more reflection. You've left the theatrical chaos of Al-Kashari behind and descended into a quieter, mist-wrapped village known only to those with patience and good boots. The locals call it Nef Hadra, which roughly translates to the place where spoons rest. You step onto its winding paths with the solemnity of someone entering a temple, not a town. Every house has a tiny spoon tucked into its outer wall, some plain, some gilded, some clearly fashioned from bones. You try not to stare too long at that one. Today you're here for what they call the last stirring, an old meditative rite performed by elders whose partners have passed or whose hands have aged too stiff to hold a spoon without shaking. The ceremony is simple, one final act of stirring, not in food, but in water. You join the villagers at dawn, gathered around a long, shallow stone basin filled with water the color of early morning. Each elder steps forward with their old wedding spoon, dips it into the water, and stirs, once clockwise, once counterclockwise. Then they whisper something into the ripples, wishes, goodbyes, gratitudes. You're told the ceremony releases the emotional residue the spoon has soaked up. It's not just wood, one woman says. It holds arguments, apologies, all the meals we never talked through. And here's the part that stings a bit. At the end, the spoon is laid gently into a stone-lined stream and carried away. Some float for a few seconds, some spin wildly, one sinks instantly. The crowd sighs quietly. No cheers, no gasps, just collective understanding. Historians still argue whether the last stirring began as a funerary ritual or a metaphorical handoff of wisdom to the next generation. Some point to Mesopotamian purification practices, others to older Anatolian cleansing customs. A few think it was invented by someone who just needed to declutter their utensil drawer with poetic flair. You watch one old man hobble forward. His spoon is cracked along the handle and patched with silver wire. He stirs, pauses, and whispers, "You always knew when to taste it first." Then he lets it go. The current carries it gently, rocking like a cradle. After the ritual, you're shown something unexpected. A spoon tree. A massive olive tree, gnarled like a witch's hand, with dozens, maybe hundreds, of spoons hanging from its branches by red thread. No one touches it, not even birds. This is where the lucky ones go, you're told. Couples who stayed sweet through the bitter. Apparently, when two partners pass on, their spoons are bound together and hung here. Some of them are ancient, weather-worn into shapes that barely resemble anything you'd stir with. But still, they dangle, bumping softly in the breeze like wind chimes that only ring when no one's listening. A fringe belief says if a spoon falls from the tree, the couple's story isn't done yet. One did last winter. The spoon was retrieved, wrapped in cotton, and now rests in the local temple, waiting for someone to dream of its next chapter. You get a chance to sit with one of the caretakers, an old woman with ink-stained fingers and spoon tattoos snaking up her arms. She hands you a warm bowl of barley stew and watches you eat. "You know why it's always stew in these stories?" she asks. You shrug. "Because stew forgives. You burn it a little, it still feeds you. Add too much salt, it humbles you. Leave it alone, it deepens. Just like love. You eat in silence for a while. The stew is incredible. Earthy. Generous. Like someone put autumn in a bowl and told it to make you cry. And then she brings out something rare. The spoon of separation. It's a ceremonial spoon that splits in two, right down the handle. Not for fighting. Not even for stirring. This one's for saying goodbye. When a marriage ended, amicably or not, the couple would break the spoon together. Not out of anger, but respect. You helped me stir what I could. Now I'll cook my own path. The broken halves were stored separately in little clay jars. If ever the same couple reunited. The pieces were fitted back together with a golden seam, inspired by kintsugi pottery. Some call it the spoon of starting over. Of course, this isn't done often. Repaired spoons are rare and revered. One hangs in the temple, thick with gold veins, heavy with stories. You stare at it for a long time, thinking about the weight of trying again. The absurd courage of choosing someone twice. The woman beside you smiles as if she can read your mind. Some folks say love is a flame, she says, but I think it's a spoon. It carries, it stirs, it feeds, and if it breaks, it can be mended, but you have to want to stir again. Night falls soft and slow in Nef Hadra. You sleep under the stars, your own spoon tucked under your pillow like a dream catcher, and in your dreams you're stirring water, slowly, lovingly, the ripples spreading wider than you thought possible. You rise in darkness long before the sun spills gold across the hills. The air is cool and a little damp, the kind of morning that smells like wet stone and quiet promises. This is it, the last leg of the journey. Not a place, but a ritual. A spooning of the soul, if you will. You've traveled through ancient kitchens, dueling circles, shadowy archives, and theaters of love-struck cutlery. And now you stand in a circular field surrounded by low stone walls, open to the sky. At the center, a single clay hearth, warm but unlit. You're here for the final tradition, the binding of the spoon. This ritual marks the official joining of two people, not just in life, but in the intimate daily act of feeding one another. It's quiet, sacred, a little weird, perfect. A local couple, married 63 years, walks slowly into the circle. They're hunched, but somehow regal. Each holds a wooden spoon, worn smooth by time and soup. No carvings, no inlays, just use. They kneel by the hearth and, in practiced silence, bind their two spoons together with a thin ribbon of woven linen. Then, using both hands, 4 hands, 2 spoons, they light the fire. The flame catches slow, then strong. You're told the ribbon represents choice, a deliberate entanglement. The spoons, shared responsibility. The fire, a life they will feed together. Once the flame steadies, they pour a pot of grain into a shallow bowl and stir, together, always together. Then something odd happens. They untie the spoons, split them, and hand one to you. Your turn, the woman says, smiling. Not to marry, just to carry. You're not sure if it's symbolic or an actual invitation to stir their breakfast, but you accept the spoon like a knighthood. Nearby, another couple steps forward, and another. It becomes a chain, each person handing off a spoon, stirring the same pot, passing warmth from one set of hands to the next. There's a phrase they say during the passing, "May your spoon never scrape alone." Kind of corny, kind of perfect. You learn that every wedding ends this way in this village, one communal fire, one shared stirring. It's the couple's first public act as a unit. Not kissing, not bowing, but cooking, serving. According to a fringe custom, if someone drops the spoon during this part, the fire must be extinguished and relit from scratch. Not as punishment, but as a reset. A reminder that flames must be chosen, not just lit. Historians still argue whether this tradition was born from famine-era cooperation or romanticized agrarian myth. Some say it was a rite for communal ovens when wood was scarce and sharing was survival. Others believe it reflects the spiritual weight of nourishment, that to feed is to vow. After the ritual, you're led to a structure called the hearth hall. It's not quite a kitchen, not quite a shrine. Inside, spoons hang from beams like wind chimes, dozens of them, all of them once used in this binding ritual. One catches your eye, carved from olive wood, engraved with a constellation. The label reads, "For stirring dreams in the dark." You leave a quiet breath there, half in awe, half in longing. Then, just when you think it's over, you're invited to the feast of the left hand. It's a silent meal where everyone must eat and serve with their non-dominant hand. Why? Because love is awkward, service is messy, and using the wrong hand levels the table. Suddenly, everyone's fumbling, laughing, apologizing for flung grains and missed mouths. It's humbling, disarming, deeply human. And there's the lesson. You don't need to stir perfectly. You just need to keep stirring, even with the hand that shakes, even when the spoon feels too heavy. Especially then. Later that night, you lie beside the glowing hearth, your spoon still warm in your grip, and you realize something. You've been fed by strangers who treated you like family. You've watched people promise eternity with nothing but wood and fire. You've seen love that doesn't shout but simmers. And now your spoon isn't just a souvenir, it's a story. One that begins, as all the best do, in the everyday. Between bites, between burns, between bowls, scraped clean and refilled again. So if someone ever asks why the ancient Syrians gave spoons as wedding gifts, you'll smile and say, because sometimes the most sacred vow is simply this: I will stir with you. Word count, 1,500. Wind down, 300 words. So now you rest. The fire crackles low behind your thoughts, and the spoons, oh, the spoons, rattle gently in your memory like lullabies made of wood and promise. Your legs are tired, but not in a bad way. More like the kind of tired that comes after wandering through a story that left its footprints all over your heart. You think back to the duel in the dust, the puppet love story, the spoon tree that holds generations in its crooked arms, and that warm bowl of stew, the one that told you forgiveness is edible if you let it simmer. The world feels slower now, doesn't it? Softer, like the kind of place where two people might really say, "Here, have the first bite," and mean it every time. Your breathing deepens, your grip on the spoon loosens. You don't need to carry it anymore, not tonight. It's done its work. It's told you the quiet truth. That love, real love, often comes on a wooden handle, warm from the pot, tasting faintly of time and trust. So close your eyes, traveler. Let the last fire dim behind your eyelids. Let the story settle into your bones, like the last stir before serving. And remember, may your spoon never scrape alone.